Myslím si, že Tímea Junghaus netreba predstavovať špeciálne. Je kurátorka vizuálnej sekcie RomArchive a vlastne posunie celú túto diskusiu, ktorú sme doteraz mali o fyzických priestoroch muzea, možno do trochu súčasnej diskusie o digitálnych zbierkach a digitálnej prezentácii kultúry. Je zároveň výkonnou riaditeľkou novej inštitúcie ERIAC, ktorá sídli v Berlíne.
My name is Tímea Junghaus, and I am an art historian and contemporary art curator, and I'm a Roma woman, and I'm wearing multiple hats today, so I need to extend on that. First of all, I'm here as the curator of the archive section for visual arts at the RomArchive project. And this RomArchive project is gigantic. I don't know if you know, but this is the largest ever Roma project in Europe. And the visual art section, which is represented here by me, is actually a very small portion of the RomArchive, one that focuses exclusively on the notion of Roma art. I like this term that Emilia used earlier, Emilia and Robert in their presentation, so on the notion of Roma art. Unfortunately, we did not coordinate our presentation, so I'm coming here exactly with the same topic that Emilia and Robert came. And I can only hope that I can entertain you a little bit, making some repetitions, but at the same time it will sound very didactic because it's a repetition. And then I will extend further on the visual art section of the RomArchive. But by the time I get to this short end of this short first presentation, you should have an idea where I'm coming for my RomArchive section. And the other hat that I'm wearing today is actually from September. I am director of the Berlin-based European Roma Institute for Arts and Culture. It is our first European institution. It sounds very glamorous, you know, but this is also, like almost everything in the Roma context, a startup organization, which you start from scratch, and you look for your space, and you look for ways to make it sustainable, and you connect with other Roma organizations and build a little hub that ensures that this little vulnerable and fragile thing becomes something large. So there's a lot of expectations for ERIAC, but what I would like is to invite all your contributions, actually, not just your expectations, but contributions to this new organization in Berlin. So this is actually like my last performance in this hat with the RomArchive curators. I will try to enjoy this one. So I also brought this central notion to you. What does it mean that we talk about Roma art? And you need to understand that the first Roma arrived to Europe around 1490. That is the first written sources, 1427 in Saint-Denis, the first written sources. And art history is a wonderful, how shall I say, accessory for us to understand the concept of the Western European world about Roma people. Western art, this art history that we were educated in, teaches us about Roma being outside of the city walls, being the non-Christians, like on this very famous composition of Bruegel, the only person who is not listening to the sermon of St. John the Baptist is actually the Roma person in the striped blanket who's looking back onto us. He is the non-Christian, the non-listener of the group. Or starting from the Northern Renaissance, Roma people not just described as the non-Christian, but artists also play with the idea of describing Roma as the ugly, the outcast, the dark-skinned, dirty people, the travelers whom are not included into the regularly understand communities. And then I go further. Of course, I can't give you an art history lesson in like 5 minutes, but I go further and I bring to you something very interesting about what happens with the Roma image in the 19th century. And it's very specific that in Central and Eastern Europe, which is our location, Roma become dependent of the primitives and the Asian and African primitives of the Western arts. What I mean that they become understood exactly like Western artists understand in the West their own primitives. So our artists here in Central Europe do not travel to Tahiti and to Aix-en-Provence to find their primitives. They travel to their closest colonies, which is going to be the Szolnok gypsy settlement and the Slovakian gypsy settlement. And that's where they find their primitives. So what we find is that the Roma body is continuously sexualized and objectified in the art history, not just of Central Europe, but then later in the history of Western art. And this is a collection of mine from the Ecseri flea market just a few weeks ago, where my mother likes to go to buy carpets. I don't know why ladies do this at a certain age. But if you go around the flea market today and photograph the available gypsy girl paintings, you will find that this kind of tradition of objectifying, sexualizing, and feminizing the Roma, criminalizing the Roma, still exists and has a nice market in Europe. This is just the gypsy girls in one so-called, I hate this word, but field trip to the Ecseri flea market. And at the same time, while this is happening in art history, we have to recognize that there is this amazing genealogy, this amazing history of the Roma cultural movement. Already from the 1970s, late 1960s, Roma artists claim authorship. And I don't have the time to extend on how this Roma cultural movement is a continuous history in which every little exhibition opening, little flyer of a cultural house, the poems of an artist, of a poet, how they all contribute towards this long and oppressed and hidden genealogy which is stolen from us. So I cannot give you like the exact genealogy because I would have to extend for hours, most probably by country, but constructing this oppressed genealogy is, I believe, one of the missions of the Roma intellectuals and their supporters in today's Europe. And I have, I think on the slide, I have the first international exhibition. I have the theme of the first Roma pavilion in Venice. Let's take the Venice example. Venice Biennale opened its door in 1895, and from 1895 until 2007, there wasn't even one Roma cleaning lady who we can remember as being part of the most prestigious art event of the world, right? And in 2007, Roma artists initiate a Roma pavilion. And for the first time, Roma are on the agenda, competing with national representations, proposing a transnational vision for the Roma identity. If we are looking at what are the organizations, what are the major players in this genealogy, in this history, then we will find that there are hardly any. We know the Brno Museum of Romani Culture, and we know the Kajdikas Gallery, the commercial gallery. We know the Bratislava Museum, and now there is Eriak. This is an older map, actually, that I'm using. And there are really tiny spots on this map, like the Gallery 8 of Budapest. Oh, and while there is no really large support for Roma representation and for the development of reconstructing our genealogy or reconstructing this notion of Roma art, there is always support for visuality and propaganda against the Roma. So I am saying that Roma art and this notion of Roma cultural production also has a role in countering the anti-Gypsyist agenda and the anti-Roma visuality. So I bring you this very perverse research of mine just very quickly. This is a collection of anti-Roma billboards and banners and visuality from Central Europe. This one is on munkahelyet.org. It's a website. It's, you know... And then this one is a Jobbik flyer, which is criminalizing Roma, collecting garbage. And also, we wouldn't expect this, but from Sweden, the most developed democracy, where in the underground, the text is criminalizing Roma begging, let's stop the organized crime of Roma begging, it says. You might be familiar with this example, the SNS party's campaign, let's not feed those who do not want to work. And here's some other examples. This is a Hungarian one which says, let's have the rise of our gypsy people. Or there's an example from Italy. Roma are massacring Donna Italia. Or this one from Romania, which comes with an educational video, which educates people on the normal Romanian citizens and then the Roma citizens, because they are sounding very familiar. There's simple takeovers from the 1930s anti-black campaigns. And what I'm saying is this movement of Roma art is really trying to make an effort to counter the visuality educated by these oppressive and anti-gypsist forces. And Roma women artists even take this one step further. They have counter strategies, feminist strategies, to kind of criticize whiteness and question, like Delaine Lebada's, who is pulling the strings to control our world. And then there's other strategies. I bring you this one by Gabi Jimenez, who's a very, very well-known artist, who's kind of, how shall I say, runs a business to fulfill the demands of very rich commissioners who request paraphrases of famous artworks. This is a semi-legal activity. Of course, I can't extend long on this, but what the artist does is he smuggles the Roma caravans and the Roma lifestyle onto the paintings. So here, for example, on the horizon, instead of the rooftops, you see the caravan. So imagine when this rich commissioner takes the work home, and then after a few weeks of having it on his wall, he realizes that he also got the Roma village on his painting. Gabi is also very critical about the community and says that we do not have mouth to talk with. We are a gigantic community, but we are not able to protect our self-interest. We are unable to do so. And Roma artists are very critical about how we do not mobilize this notion of the European values and what this means for the future of Europe and the future of our community, and how we could educate Europe on a kind of new humanity, which is taught by, for example, feminist critiques such as Gayatri Spivak, who says that this kind of new humanity is really important for the transformation, for not just the minority community, but for our common communities. This is, for example, an installation by Damian and Delaine Lebas in front of the Austrian Parliament on the same methodology of questioning European values and questioning where safe Europe exists for Roma. And yes, Roma women artists take this whole discourse one step further and apply feminist strategies, the strategies of parody, for example, which is never kind of this self-exhibitionist strategy, but more, as Judith Butler says, this kind of subversive strategy to kind of turn the rules against those who have created them in a very creative way. So this is, for example, Bela here, painted by a Hungarian woman artist, feminist woman artist, purposely in naive style, while the artist doesn't engage in this naive style, by the way. So Bela is being served by the women. And this is Omara's work, who describes everything that is happening on the painting, since an art historian once misunderstood her painting when she's looking for her glass eye in the grass. With her sister, it was exhibited as lesbians. So since then, the artist always inscribes onto the painting what is on the painting. So on this one, how did she dare getting pregnant before she has a house? And she addresses social issues connected to Roma on her very lyric blue paintings. And artists also engage in the criticism of the far-right efforts to oppress and violate the Roma community. And then another aspect is how we engage in the exploration of our own history and in the Holocaust. So you see here Tamara Moises's performative action for the Prague 7 area, where instead of a Tesco supermarket now, thanks to Tamara's action, stands a Roma Holocaust memorial, as this field is very important in the Roma Holocaust context. It was a collection field before deportation of Roma. And we could continue further, for example, with Selma Selman, who is now studying with a full scholarship in the US. And as I said before, Selma is a feminist artist, mainly with video works, which I cannot show you due to the time lag. But she is one of the young generation who is now working in multiple genres. We cannot talk about art brut or naive art or the archaic versions of the art that we know as Roma art any longer. No Travelers is a sign of Daniel Baker. No Traveler signs are all around London and Kent, where the artist is from. They are trying to stop the Roma communities from stopping on different fields, and the artist plays with these signs and creates transcendent versions from this. And I brought Robert's recent exhibition from Gallery 8 Budapest. If you go on gallery8.org, you will see that there are many wonderful drawings from this installation that he created there. So I would like to even further proliferate the Roma discourse with Roma artists themselves referring to sexual orientation, the issues of being boxed into different categories in their identity, then double minority identity, then sexual orientation identity, and not being able to, how shall I say, enjoy the same kind of fluidity as others do. But Emilia and Roberto already extended on this. And I brought Emilia's work as well, as I find this the most progressive. I know it's really bad photos because I stole them from the Facebook page of the artist. But I brought them because I consider this work extremely radical and progressive, as Roma artists and Roma women artists very rarely deal with the taboos of the body. So this is even further stepping all the limitations that we had in the past. And what I'm trying to say is, and I conclude, and I need you to take this with you today. So the Roma art that, I don't know, I'm obsessed with is something that is built from multiple substances. First of all, it is a positive intervention of the Roma image, which has been created for 600 years by non-Roma. So we make a positive intervention into the Roma image. Number two, it is counter-visual to all the disgusting, oppressive, and racist visuals of the anti-Gypsy forces today. Number three, it recognizes our oppressed and hidden genealogy, history of the cultural movement. Number four, I think it speaks very sensitively and carefully from within the Roma subjectivity. And I think that it has a very important role as opposition, of course, but opposition is not enough. As Bell Hooks, feminist theorist, black feminist theorist, says, in the vacant moment one has rejected, one has opposed, there is the necessity to make ourselves anew. And in this process, painful process of making ourselves anew, Roma art has the most significant role to play in present-day Europe. In the case of the RomArchive, I am only the curator of the visual art section. There are these wonderful colleagues for performing art, film. Then there is a section on dance. Then there is a section on academic research. And what else is there a section for? Academic research and Holocaust. And each section has its mom or dad, and I'm the mom of the visual art section. And the archive, the way that I imagined in the beginning this archive is I wanted a digital restitution. I wanted to knock on the doors of all kinds of ethnographic collections and museums and say, it's okay that you keep our collections. It's not okay, but okay is that you have our collections, but we want a digital restitution. Give us everything you have because we will contextualize it in our RomArchive. And then I was faced with this very specific technicality, temporality, and limitation of the archive. I don't know how many of you work regularly with an archive. This was an archive that was not created by me, but an archive which is based on a mass of data, which is structured in a database, and then a website which pulls data out of this database. And this is really how major archives work. So this is the right track to follow. So everything that I wanted, the digital restitution of our past, the reclaiming our history from institutions, was not possible because we don't have the technical requirements to do so. I also really wanted to go to personal archives. I'm into this Roma art notion, so I wanted to contact artists and collectors and just people whom are similarly obsessed with this Roma art than I am, and say it is the time to give our archives to RomArchive. But that's also impossible because a good archive, and listen to this, a good archive has a preservation master where a photo is above 500 megabytes large, right? Over 800 dots, how do you say this in English? Dots resolution. It's very high resolution. So that a preservation master in a good quality is possible to leave for the future. Now, in the RomArchive, where we are a grassroots organization, but hardly anyone has the proper technical equipment to ever make a good picture. Not talking about the 1960s, right, when nobody even considered building our own archive and leaving it for the next generations in preservation master format. It is impossible to collect this data. And also, this was my desire. I'm coming from a very subjective story of what I wanted, but you need to understand that the RomArchive itself, if like the management would sit here and other colleagues, is a collection of curated contents. So the invited curators create the content, and that content should be responding to the technical requirements of the archive. So whatever I have done from the moment I was commissioned was done in very nice technical formats and fits the requirements. And yes, my heart broke that some of the content plans that I had to let go, had to be modified. Some of the artists weren't able to participate. But for sure, we will have this one surface in which we have very high quality, very good format that we can work with 20 years from now as well. So this is the background story of the RomArchive, and I show you that in my section, I had an approach. I have 3 unit sections in my archive section, and the 3 unit sections you would already be able to recognize because you heard my first presentation. My first unit is researching the image of the Roma in art history. My second unit is reconstructing the Roma cultural movement's history from the perspective of Roma art and focusing specifically on the development of Roma art. And my third section is the collection of Roma contemporary artists' oeuvres, their biographies and works. And in my first unit, of the visual art section, I invited the most famous art historians to a conference. There was a conference in the Goethe Institute, Budapest, which was called The Image of the Roma in Art History. And these very, how shall I say, distinguished art historians who have ever researched in their area anything about the Roma image or Roma appeared in their texts, all gathered and gave a presentation. So I have Mikhail Bogdal, who you might have heard about already, extending on why do we see what we see and how we see prejudices already engraved in the literary and art history tradition of Europe. Or I had Peter Bell talking about the Bohemians of the Seicento. and how they apply what they know about the Roma in the Seicento. So he brings this Bamboccianti painting, and he extends on what people knew already about the Roma and how artists, to fulfill the popular imagination about the Roma, purposely regenerate these symbols and stories in the paintings of the Bamboccianti. Or I had Erwin Pokorny give a fantastic presentation about the earliest representations of the Roma from the 1490s through the Northern Renaissance, all the way to the 16th century. And specifically focusing onto the fortune teller figure. And then we continued and went on towards the 19th century imagination. We were looking for traces of the literary tradition connecting with the illustrations of major papers of the age. So Julia Pop, for example, extended on the Three Gypsies, Nicolas Lenau's famous poem, appearing and inspiring a lot of art history, art presentations or depictions of the Roma. And I also gave a presentation, yes, extending on the role of the model. So I looked at the Roma representation from the Northern Renaissance, and then I go all the way until the 19th century and identify famous models. So I asked the question, can we construct any kind of Roma history through the depictions of Roma? And how do these Roma models, what do they teach us? What is the model story giving us in art history, and why don't we ever explore the famous stories? For example, Fenella Lovell, who was actually the model of Rodin, and then Rodin gave her to the little Hungarian artist Ripple Ronai, who brought her to Hungary, and she inspired poets and writers and famous painters of the age. So who is going to write the story of Fenella Lovell, for example, in Hungary? And then I come to the conclusion that perhaps there isn't much that we actually get to know about Roma through the presentations of famous Western European artists. However, we get to know a real lot about the desires and imaginations of the white artist about the Roma, and it's still worthwhile to explore this. And then my unit 2, unit 2, yes. So my unit 2 is Roma cultural history. Imagine this part of my section as a timeline. So imagine that you are scrolling through on a website in the different ages, and then at certain dates, like 1969, the discovery of János Balázs, the first Hungarian artist, shows up. Or we see the Première Mondiale d'Art Cigány, the first world exhibition of the Roma by Sandra Zsajá on the date 1985. Or we see the 79, the 2007, or we see today's conference on 2017, and we see the exhibition by Otto and Transit and Emilia and Robert in 2017. So this is a timeline that I propose for Unit 2. And Unit 3, I have contemporary artists who are self-proclaimed Roma, over 50 artists, and I will have 5 online curated exhibitions. The exhibitions are not curated by me. I invited real fancy celebs of the curatorial world. So Susanna Milewska is curating, for example, the Macedonian curator, and then Delane Lebas is curating an exhibition. Magda Moszkalewicz, the Polish curator, is curating another one together with the support of Daniel Baker, the artist. So these are the exhibitions, and just imagine that we have a photo of the artist, and then we have a biography. Does this say that she ran away? Because last time I gave a presentation, I was really attacked by a lot of people because I actually. This is also the biography that's part of her Wikipedia page, and it says that she ran away from home, so Roma are sometimes very upset with me for duplicating the stereotype. And then we have works and the connected, of course, information to the work and the caption. Most of the time, the caption was written by me because the artist would not reply to this email of, please write a caption to your artwork. So I just write short captions explaining the artworks. And Kiba is a Finnish artist, a feminist artist who is part of RomArchive. This is she's a Kale, a Finnish Kale. That's a Roma community in Finland, and she's a feminist artist. She's in conflict with her very traditional community. This is, for example, her skirt. This is a silk or a velvet skirt, very heavy velvet skirt that the Kale wear. And in the frame of a nice video performance, she nailed it with knives into this wooden frame, which is, the skirt itself is like 3 meters wide as you stretch this beautiful Kale skirt. And it's entitled The Black Butterfly. So I have this in the case of other artists. This is Tibor Balog's installations connected to Holocaust. And these are the short, you should never do this with a PowerPoint, this much text, but these are the short exhibitions that I have in the section by some of the curators. So, for example, let's say Susanna Milewska's, let's look at that one. She's rewriting the protocols, naming, renaming, and profiling. Interesting how our minds are all in sync in the community at the moment. So she is considering an exhibition with the invitation with Kiba, Nihad Nino Pushia, Selma Selman, Marika Schmidt, and Alfred Ulrich, and they will play with the protocols that define the Roma, present-day Roma oppression and the racialized representations. So I'm done.
Thank you. So, I wonder if you have any questions. Máte nejaké otázky?
Hi. Tímea, can you say something about ERIAC and what is the connect between ERIAC and RomArchive? I don't get it. RomArchive is a project from ERIAC? No. No? Okay. This is...
So, RomArchive was started already in 2015, and RomArchive is coming onto web, I think June 2018. And I was hired as a curator in the RomArchive in 2016, and for me, the RomArchive basically closed because I'm curator, I'm on the curating level of this, and I have a wonderful, amazing team whom are still struggling with the database and the management of data, and I don't understand what they are talking about, but I'm very supportive. It's just now it's just a database and coming onto the web part of the RomArchive project. And then they will have a website, and the RomArchive is a Kulturstiftung des Bundes project. There is a management team in Germany, in Berlin, called Sayerbrei and Rabe, and they are going to have this archive soon, and the archive has a board of about 30 politicians and intellectuals, Roma. Very strange as a curator to work with a board of 40 politicians and intellectuals, but there's a board, and they will have to consider who is the future host of the archive. And I think that we have a lot of good, strong organizations now, like the Heidelberg Documentation Center, I think, is interested in this. And we will see. And ERIAC has nothing to do with the archive. ERIAC is a new organization that started in September 2018, but it is our only international lobby organization. And honestly, I think it has the capacity to grow content in this archive in the future. So ERIAC will also be available. If no one wants this hot potato, then we will make sure that it doesn't get dropped. Okay, and from ERIAC, I have a beautiful film that we screened in the launching event. So if later we can also screen it. I don't know. I can show it to you personally too.
How long is it? You can, if you have more questions about archives, we can answer them now, and then we can show the movie.
But perhaps we should focus on the archive today. That's what we are here for.
Questions? Otázky? Nejaké? No, však to nevadí.
No, you can ask.
Ale je to aj zaujímavé pre ostatných. Okay. She's shy and she wants to talk personally. Okay. So I have questions, if you know. That's what I'm here for. So, Tímea, what's the you kind of touched the concept of Roma art, and with dialogue with Emilia, you had some conception of like first the historical introduction of how Roma were portrayed in history, in art history, and then like introducing Roma art as a self-conception and intervention to the Roma to the art history of and a depiction of Roma identity. What's your position on this discussion? Who is a Roma artist? How is it defined?
I think that first of all we need to respect the position of the artist. So my position is I always work with self-proclaimed Roma artists. We cannot continue this practice of putting stickers and labeling things. So I think that this is always just this kind of individual strategy of being very sensitive to the artist's position. And but what happens in the community, and for me this is also very interesting, that there is this kind of pride and movement to find role models and to claim role models. So it happens to me a lot of times that an artist is very ambivalent about his position in public, and he considers himself a universal contemporary artist, but the community is claiming him. The community is proud of him and celebrates him, and his works are printed on really bad quality printers and posted in offices. And I enjoy also kind of watching this process and trying to connect the community's viewpoint with the artist in this case. So it's a complex discourse, and we have to respect the individual positions in it.
And considering the morning debate, when we discussed the fluidity of the concept of identity, with comparison to the importance of institutions, which are often using material objects and ethnographic exhibitions as a nation-building process. Do you think that there might be, or do you think that digital archives might be the tool that uses the fluidity of digital world and the possibilities of postmodern deconstruction process for proposing a new model of transnational identity that doesn't reify and objectify?
Yes, very, very complex, very smart question. So on one hand, us Roma as well are so inspired by the notions of Homi Bhabha, third space, and also the fluidity of different identities, the notion of cultural translation of Salman Rushdie. We always feel out of place coming from the Rushdie's text, and we feel in between, inspired by bell hooks and the feminists. So these discourses and theories are always mobilized in the Roma context, and we always extend on the multiplicity of our cultures, that we are not one culture, we are not one language, but we are like a multiplicity of cultures. And at the same time, what we see around us is growing national institutions, strengthening nations, and strengthening national discourses. So I think that we also need to consider this double strategy of pooling our discourses, unifying our discourses for the better good of our people. And I might be called or considered a nationalist based on this, but I really don't think this is nationalism. But I consider this is a kind of pedagogy of a new humanism. There is so much strength and so much knowledge that we carry in Europe. This whole knowledge on how to adapt to different cultures, how to be sensitive to multiple precarities, how to be sensitive to the migrants, the situation of travelers. I'm sorry. Yes, we do this. This is embarrassing. It's my mom. So how to be sensitive to multiple precarities, how to know and understand the double minority of women in a community, and how to treat this sensitively with our own men. So we have so much knowledge that we are bringing to Europe already, that I don't think this is the Roma nationalism, you know, like finally having an institution, building a common archive, defining ourselves as one people who were the victims of the Holocaust, who were the victims of smaller and larger genocides for 600 years in the gigantic map of Europe. So I don't think this is nationalism. I think this is creating this kind of new humanism, this pedagogy of new humanism in Europe, which is open to the positions of the different peripheries.
Okay, thank you. I hope someone has a question now. I hope you're not shy or afraid.
Nemusím, ty to budeš... Ježiš, zase ma všetci ma musia snímať. Dobre, že aký má vzťah k koloniálnym štúdiám a kolonizovaniu identity a všetko k tomu?
Yes, I can finally have a conversation with Amelia with the participation of translators. Thank you. So, for me, post-colonial discourses were a very important revelation in the early start of my career as a curator. I really think that we need to work with the post-colonial discourses in the conjunctions of modern and contemporary art and our identity politics. And I also think that we need to take this to a more pragmatic level. Okay that we read post-colonial theorists and we know post-colonial literature, like we excel in this now. But what is our practice for decolonizing our Roma people? And I think that we need to find strategies to delink from the different systems, like different knowledge production systems, different education and political systems, to delink, to consider what is our own construction. How can we create our own alternative constructions for educating the future generations, transferring transgenerational knowledge? And without this kind of delinking, I don't think it is possible. And delinking, just to give you an example, what happens when we delink from the Holocaust history discourse? We were educated during the Holocaust, Roma were secondary victims, we don't have the proper numbers, we engage in the battle of the numbers with different historians. It's a discourse in which Roma are helpless, they were deported and killed. But let's say the three of us, decide that we are going to look at the Holocaust discourse from the perspective of Roma resistance. And we will research uprisings because we heard about the uprising on August 2nd and May 16. So were there other uprisings? We will research the histories of Roma victims for survival, escapes, different strategies in the camps to share resources. We will also research, the heroes who have helped the Roma, and we will research Roma heroes who helped other Roma to hide and children to survive. So when we delink from what has been taught to us, then we create an alternative education on how to decolonize our Roma people. And I don't mean that, we should go underground and do something clandestine. I don't know what that is. But I know that when we sit down and we seriously consider, we delink from what has been taught to us, that it's not possible that we were like silent victims. There must be some histories of uprising, of being active, right? And then now we have a nice little Roma resistance research, and we are extending our Holocaust history, looking at it from a different perspective. And we don't just do this, but we are also very self-reflective about this new research that we are doing.
Maybe I have one question, because most maybe of your work is turned towards specific Roma institutions as RomArchives or Roma archives. And for me it was very interesting to hear about the exhibition of Láďa Gažiová now in Brno, which is putting Roma art in another context, in a context even in the proper nation where it exists, and it's putting the Roma art as part of a general discourse of the nation. So I was curious what you think about it and about these different concepts of maybe curating or Roma art or
I don't know enough about Láďa's exhibition yet. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Already Robert and Emilia mentioned it, so I have it in my notes. I have to look at it, but to be honest, I also consider, that could there be an inspiring symbolism? That kind of inspires our people, not just to talk about the hybridity and the proliferated, dispersed diaspora, but also this one significant, largest minority of Europe with 12 million people. Can we talk about the Romani nation? And we need to also remember that even the first Romani Congress called itself, the Congress of the Romani nation, and they had a flag and a pin, and they had their signature authors. So in case we are the Romani nation, then I believe this is not a discourse which recreates the national discourses again, but some kind of inspiring new nation without a territory, nation in allegory. And then if it's a nation in allegory, then what is our set of symbols? So I'm looking forward to see Láďa's exhibition, but I also have been thinking about this for a long time.
Ešte?
Nemám rada mikrofóny. Dobre. Že ja iba tak akože skúsim to zhrnúť aj tú Láďinu prezentáciu a to, čo tu Tímea dnes všetko rozprávala, že vidím v tom práve paralelu, že cítim, že Tímea má také podobné myslenie. Myslím, že, a možno mi to teraz vyvráti, že taká tá emancipácia, teraz to poviem, že čiernych ľudí, alebo černochov, že je bola dosť podobná ako to, o čo sa vlastne začíname snažiť my, a že tá Láďina koncepcia, ktorá prebrala ako keby afrofuturizmus a je to premenované na romafuturizmus, že naozaj môžeme brať veľa nejakej inšpirácie z toho, akým spôsobom sa emancipovali čierni ľudia. Teraz to takto hovorím, áno. Teraz som to takto zaškatulkovala, že čierni ľudia. A že myslím, že Tímea má dosť podobný názor, asi nie? Teraz, kým nás pretlmočia, si tu zašantíme.
Yes, absolutely. Not just that we are continuously rereading the texts produced by the civil rights movement, the Black civil rights movement, and their leaders and cultural producers as, I don't know, our role models in our movement, but we also need to consider that without one platform, our movement is dead. So this is one of the reasons why, yes, the archives and the international institutions and international exhibitions are extremely important, because those are the platforms in which we connect and discuss, and we kind of create this feeling of the one movement.